The story begins with a cute, blonde-haired little girl yawning awake, unsure of when she drifted off to sleep. Suddenly, a system window popped up before her eyes, startling her and filling her with confusion. Mulling over the strange sound she'd just heard, the system displayed restricted character information, revealing her to be a low-ranking side character, fated to be cruelly murdered by her father on her 9th birthday. The girl recalled playing a mobile game just moments ago, a bad initial dice roll, trapping her in the lowest tier character. She'd spent her entire paycheck upgrading the dice to level 9, only to find herself abruptly transported to this new reality. She suspected this might be the dimensional transfer she'd only heard whispers of, lamenting it as a disaster. Her despair deepened as the system reiterated her grim fate, the cruel destiny hard to process. She questioned why such a miserable twist of fate had befallen her. Just as a maid entered and noticed the small girl. Seeing the child crying, the maid inquired about her distress, asking if she was hungry. Confused, the girl wondered who this maid was. The maid soothed her, telling her to wait a moment while holding her and mentioning that the lady heiress would be coming to see her soon. Feeling a warmth and comfort, the girl realized this wasn't a dream, but reality, panic setting in at the thought of her predetermined death at 9. She wished it were all a dream, but quickly accepted the reality, determined to live this second life well. She reviewed what she knew so far. She was the only daughter of a wealthy, noble family. Thankfully, they weren't the type of high-status, yet bankrupt family. Her parents seemed indifferent to her and everything around them. This was advantageous for her plans to escape. Most importantly, she realized this world was inside a game. The game she'd entered, she explained, was called Reincarnated Life Determined by the Dice, or RLD for short, a mobile game based on a novel. Players of Heroes of Helios rolled dice to select a character from the novel and made decisions at each branching point. Characters were ranked by their importance in the original story, ranging from 1-star side characters to 5-star protagonists. Unfortunately, her rank was a measly 1-star side character, a fact that frustrated her. Worse, she didn't even know her character's name. Although it had been a week in-game, she suspected her father's indifference might be connected to her tragic fate. But even her mother hadn't appeared yet. She wondered if this was that typical trope, the cold and distant father, but didn't want to jump to conclusions. The lack of a name irritated her. She decided to wait, as having a name would help her plan how to change her fate. Feeling sleepy in her infant body, she decided to save the rest of her thoughts for when she woke up. She considered it all an investment for the future. When the baby awoke, she found herself in the arms of a lady. Feeling full, she wondered why everyone was so busy and if something special was happening. The lady placed her in a cradle, telling the maid they needed to finish decorating the young lady's room by tomorrow, questioning if it could be done by then. The maid replied that working overtime should make it possible. The baby wondered why her room was being redecorated. The lady expressed displeasure at the timing, mentioning Agnes's absence. The maid asked if the jeweled goblet should be removed, but the lady heiress insisted it remain in the display case, saying the young lady liked it. The maid questioned whether a baby not even 3 months old could notice or appreciate such a thing. Heiress confidently replied that the young lady was not only clever, but extraordinary, observing her surroundings with bright, intelligent eyes whenever the opportunity arose. The protagonist realized she needed to commit more fully to her infant role. Considering her tiny body, she noted she wasn't even 3 months old yet. Suddenly, the system announced that the access restrictions had been lifted. The updated system window displayed her character information, confirming her as a 2-month-old baby girl, a 1-star supporting character. Her fate remained grim, destined to be killed by her father on her 9th birthday. She noticed that the window had only added her gender and age, but no attribute window or abilities were displayed. Frustration gnawed at her as she wondered why the enhanced dice she'd spent so much money upgrading weren't showing up here. Recalling the last upgrade, she remembered a strange pop-up appearing at the end, adding another layer of mystery to her current predicament. The system revealed that 9 dice had guided her to this other world. The girl realized that upgrading the dice to level 9 might have triggered her dimensional transfer. Dismay washed over her. Why hadn't the transfer given her a better fate? Why did she have to face death at the tender age of 9? Trying to compose herself, she focused her mind, forcing herself to think positively. She reasoned that the dice's enhancement effects might be imperceptible in her infant state, hoping she would eventually be able to change her level or fate, just like in the game. Despite being a one-star supporting character with a tragic destiny, the wealth and jewels surrounding her offered a sliver of comfort. Things weren't all bad, she thought. The housekeeper fretted about the delayed preparations, unsure if they could finish before the mansion's lord returned. Hearing this, the protagonist realized the lord of the mansion was coming back. The maids worried about the lack of time, but Eris insisted everything had to be completed before his arrival, bustling about and urging the others to work harder. The protagonist noted that Eris hadn't been at the mansion before, likely making preparations elsewhere. She decided not to worry, figuring that since they weren't interested in her, she could live quietly, unnoticed. Eris joked that the Lord would scold her if she neglected the young miss, momentarily unsettling Urine, the maid. Eris reassured her it was just a jest, playfully pushing Urine to refocus on her work. A flicker of fear touched the protagonist. Even if she could change her fate, there was no guarantee things would go as planned. What if her father killed her before she reached 9? But she rallied herself, placing her faith in the power of the level 9 dice. She would succeed. She vowed to confront the game developers if she ever got the chance. Urine noticed the protagonist was awake, commenting that she seemed to be in a better mood. Eris picked her up, and the protagonist thought to herself. The sight of all the precious objects around her lifted her spirits. Wealth, she concluded, was always exhilarating. Eris scolded Selena, another maid, for entering the young Miss's room without knocking. Selena apologized nervously, relaying the housekeeper's message. The Lord had returned. The news startled Eris, Iran, and the protagonist. The protagonist was shocked by her father's swift arrival after the message, feeling unprepared to face the man destined to kill her. Eris quickly prepared to greet him, leaving the protagonist in her cradle. The protagonist hoped her father wouldn't come to see her immediately, speculating that he must have more pressing matters to attend to. She decided not to overthink it and try to sleep. As the Lord appeared, Eris nervously greeted him, offering to help him remove his armor. The protagonist watched him, realizing this man was her father. The story of Helios heroes revolved around the protagonist saving the world from the Demon King, who controlled monsters and dispatched them to the human world. To combat this threat, nations formed subjugation squads. Noble families were obligated to participate. The protagonist learned that the family she was born into was part of this year's subjugation squad. Having completed their perilous mission, they were here to see her. When her father arrived, the young girl, mentally unprepared, felt a surge of panic. She was taken aback by his appearance. Despite his intimidating aura, the kind that suggested he could wrestle a lion barehanded, he was far more handsome than she had imagined. The intensity of his gaze, a simmering fire in his eyes, startled her. A chilling thought arose. Was he already contemplating her demise? In her panic, she resorted to the ultimate infantile tactic, feigning sleep, hoping he would leave quickly. Eris, ever perceptive, attempted to diffuse the tension. "My lord," she suggested, "perhaps you should remove your armor. The young miss seems quite tired." The protagonist, still pretending to slumber, offered a silent prayer of thanks for Eris's intervention. The Lord, however, was not so easily swayed. He questioned Eris about the normalcy of sustained eye contact in infants. Eris, unfazed, assured him it was perfectly natural, attributing it to their shared bloodline. The Lord seemed unconvinced, muttering something about their shared blood. The protagonist interpreted this as annoyance at her not having averted her gaze. She made a mental note to never look directly into his eyes again. Suddenly, the Lord scooped her up into his arms. Panic flared anew. She resolved to maintain the charade of sleep. Then, to her horror, a tiny hiccup escaped her. Frantically, she worried whether this small incident would enrage him, fearing the worst. The Lord, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, asked Eris if babies hiccup even while sleeping. Internally, the protagonist was a whirlwind of anxiety, praying to every deity she could recall. Eris, ever the picture of composure, explained that it was quite normal for babies to hiccup in their sleep, especially if their backs were padded. Once again, the protagonist silently thanked her savior. The Lord gently placed the baby back in her cradle, declaring his intention to heed Eris's wise advice and remove his armor. The protagonist, still reeling from the encounter, took comfort in the fact that she was alive and seemingly safe. Meanwhile, outside the room, the other maids expressed newfound respect for Eris's calm demeanor in such a tense situation. One maid approached the protagonist, whispering her relief that the young miss was unharmed. The protagonist realized that the maid, Agnes, must have been terrified as well, yet her concern had been for her charge. The knowledge that Agnes was also safe brought a wave of comfort. She began to analyze her father's features, recalling his unusual golden eyes. She tried to remember any noble families with red hair and golden eyes from the novel, but none of the prominent families she could recall fit the description. Neither the Windseekers, nor the Claremeltons, nor the Lubash family matched. She concluded that her father must belong to a family of lesser importance in the original story. Otherwise, she wouldn't be a mere one-star supporting character. She decided to wait for her father to name her. Once she had a name, she could piece together her identity and her surroundings. For now, sleep was the best course of action. The following day, the protagonist's father departed the manor once more, this time to deliver a subjugation report to the capital. Although he was expected to return immediately, he made an unexpected visit back to the manor, leaving the protagonist puzzled by his actions. Agnes, noticing the protagonist's pensive expression, encouraged her to smile. The protagonist attempted a smile, and Agnes, delighted, exclaimed that she looked like an angel. Pleased with this reaction, the protagonist felt a surge of happiness. However, Agnes then carelessly mentioned that the young miss resembled her mother. This earned her a sharp rebuke from Eris. Agnes quickly apologized, and Eris warned her to be more careful, thankful that their lord hadn't been present to hear the remark. The protagonist pondered her situation, realizing that her character might not have a mother. She speculated that her father's apparent indifference towards her might be related to her mother, perhaps following a common trope, where the father resents the child for the mother's death during childbirth. But she dismissed the thought, feeling that her father didn't seem like that kind of man. She acknowledged, with a dawning understanding, that deciphering the dynamics between her parents might be the key to survival in this strange new world. Agnes, filled with a gentle pity for the young miss, murmured her concern. Urien chimed in, remarking on the unusual length of the recent subjugation mission, a grueling 3 months instead of the typical 1 or 2. Perhaps, she speculated, that was why the Duke had made this brief stop at the manor before returning to the capital. Eris, ever practical, cut her short, urging Urien to cease her needless chatter. The protagonist realized with a jolt that her father had been away on this subjugation mission when she was born. This meant yesterday was the very first time he had laid eyes on her, a sobering thought that explained his detached demeanor. He was a cold man, she decided, someone she must never provoke. Yet, a flicker of relief warmed her. It seemed he hadn't deliberately delayed naming her. She clung to the hope that upon his return, he would finally bestow a name upon her. With a name, she planned to unravel the mystery of her family and her place within it. Even as a mere one-star supporting character in this life story, she was determined to play her part, to rewrite her tragic fate, however insignificant that role might seem. Lost in the quiet of sleep, a strange vision flickered through her mind. Could it be her 9-star dice stirring within her? A persistent system message echoed, reminding her that she hadn't yet met the conditions to activate the choice moment event. Agnes's gentle voice roused her, drawn by what sounded like a pained whimper escaping the baby's lips. The protagonist, mortified at having disturbed Agnes, offered a silent apology. Agnes, ever kind, soothed her, dismissing it as just a bad dream. Eris bustled in, informing Agnes that they needed to inspect the room again that afternoon, in preparation for the master's return that evening. Anxiety gnawed at the protagonist as she awaited her father, his unpredictable nature a source of constant unease. Suddenly, the news of his imminent arrival rippled through the manor. As he entered, Eris, ever mindful of propriety, remarked that as 3 months had passed, it was time to bestow a name upon the infant. The protagonist, her small heart pounding, yearned to know her family name. She hoped for something elegant, something graceful. Instead, the Duke suggested Vipera, declaring it a fitting name for a family known for taking lives. The protagonist recoiled, a silent scream echoing within her at the dark implications behind the name. Before she could react, the system announced the triggering of the choice moment event, filling her with a mixture of confusion and apprehension. A strange stillness descended, a chilling silence in which she found herself unable to move. The system system message flashed again, reminding her that she still needed to fulfill the conditions to activate the choice moment. She recognized it, the same message that had haunted her dreams. Understanding dawned. Her actions dictated the choice. With that realization, control returned to her small body. She acted on instinct, offering a small flower to her father, who expressed surprise at finding such a bloom in this season. Touched by the gesture, he changed his mind, deciding to name her Alyssa. Her full name, he declared, would be Alyssa G. Draven. Eris offered her congratulations on receiving her name. A small thrill of victory coursed through Alyssa. Had she, a mere infant, managed to sway her formidable father? Suddenly, the system announced the fulfillment of the conditions, triggering her character level evolution and unlocking potential abilities. A character information window materialized, displaying her name, Alyssa G. Draven. Her rank had been upgraded to supporting character, her age now 3 months. But the information regarding her fate sent a chill down her spine. It stated that on her 9th birthday, she would be brutally murdered by her father, driven mad by some unknown force. Alyssa, overwhelmed by the detailed and emotionally charged system update, fought back tears. As she processed the information, the name Draven snagged her attention, stirring a sense of familiarity. She recalled the dragon emblem she had seen on a brooch, wondering if there was a connection. Her suspicions were confirmed as she remembered the legendary Draven ducal family, a prominent house in the Empire, rumored to be descendants of dragons, wielding extraordinary powers. Alyssa, a thrill of excitement mixed with awe coursing through her, realized the profound significance of her family's unique legacy. As a dimensional traveler inhabiting the body of a 2-month-old, she pondered her peculiar circumstances, feeling that such an extraordinary situation should at least afford her some exceptional advantages. She recalled what she had read about the Draven family and their secrets, the immense power of their dragon blood, intertwined with its notable side effects. For instance, any woman from another family who carried a child of Draven blood would endure excruciating pain throughout the pregnancy and die shortly after childbirth. Even members within the Draven family weren't immune to these effects, with some completely losing control of their immense power. Alyssa contemplated the grim reality of her own mother's death, concluding that it must have been due to the side effects of the Draven bloodline. She also harbored the unsettling suspicion that her father might one day harm her due to that same bloodline. Meanwhile, the Duke declared a simple celebration insufficient, expressing regret for missing Alyssa's birth due to the war. To commemorate the Draven family's first daughter, he ordered a grand banquet to be prepared within a month, entrusting the details of the arrangements to his heiress. As the Duke prepared to leave, Alyssa noticed he hadn't even offered her a farewell, a slight that sparked both annoyance and curiosity within her. As she noticed the brooch he had held earlier, she wondered if her stern father might possess a hidden shy and sentimental side. A week had passed since Alyssa received her name, and whenever her father made an unexpected visit, she feigned sleep. He often came simply to gaze upon her sleeping face, a behavior that puzzled her, leaving her uncertain of his intentions. One day, the Duke inquired about her name to the maids. Alyssa felt a momentary pang of panic, wondering if her father had discovered that her body was occupied by someone else. However, she realized he was addressing Agnes. Agnes nervously introduced herself as Agnes Elemenzen, prompting the Duke to thank her and Lady Eris for caring for Alyssa in his absence. Agnes hesitantly confirmed this, while Alyssa inwardly cheered her on, wishing she would respond to the Duke with more confidence. The Duke inquired whether Alyssa had exhibited any unusual behavior under Agnes's care. Caught off guard and nervous, Agnes stammered, struggling to understand the Duke's meaning. She hesitantly asked for clarification, but her lack of confidence irritated him. Inwardly, Alyssa urged Agnes to respond firmly, but before she could reply, the Duke declared Agnes unfit to serve as a maid in the Draven household. He coldly ordered her to leave the manor by the following day. Agnes was stunned, unable to comprehend the sudden turn of events. The system announced the activation of the moment of choice event. Alyssa was determined to save Agnes from dismissal, but the conditions for activating the system weren't met, preventing her from moving. She resolved to take action, knowing her choice would influence the outcome. In a swift decision, Alyssa kicked a toy into the air, startling both the Duke and Agnes. Unfazed by her father's sharp gaze, She silently reassured herself that she was used to it and turned her attention to Agnes. She mentally urged the maid to act, as the toy's trajectory placed her in a precarious position. Alyssa pretended to fall, and Agnes instinctively caught her, gently chiding her to be careful, saying it was dangerous. Inwardly, Alyssa cheered, proud of Agnes for once again demonstrating her dependable nature. As Agnes carefully held Alyssa in her arms, a surge of anger welled up inside her. She would protect Agnes, who had always been kind and supportive, and she wouldn't let anyone, especially her father, treat her this way. The Duke, noting the affection between Alyssa and Agnes, commented on their bond. However, the cold, calculating glint in his eyes still worried Alyssa. He ordered Agnes to put her back in bed and step aside. Though relieved that Agnes hadn't been dismissed, Alyssa remained wary, sensing the matter wasn't fully resolved. When the Duke requested to be alone with Alyssa, her relief at Agnes's reprieve was replaced by suspicion. A protective instinct flared within her, setting her senses on high alert. As the Duke raised his fist, a surge of anger coursed through Alyssa. She vowed to fight back if he dared to harm or control her. When the Duke gently placed a flower on Alyssa's dress, she was braced, ready to protect herself and Agnes, no matter the cost. Understanding dawned swiftly. Her mind raced, recognizing the gesture as a superficial act, a hollow performance. The Duke's feigned concern for rumors only deepened her suspicion. Alyssa saw through his preoccupation with the family's reputation. After all, if he truly cared, he wouldn't have given her such a cold, unfeeling name. His promise of a gift before the celebration seemed a mere veil over his true nature. Trapped within her infant body, Alyssa realized that despite her outward innocence, her mind was sharp and aware. She acknowledged the absurdity of acting childish in a baby's form, but at least she was no longer fooled by her father's pretense. Agnes, surprised and curious about the brooch the Duke seemingly offered Alyssa, praised its unique craftsmanship, taking it as a sign of his affection. Alyssa, unsure of the Duke's motives for the gift, was nevertheless relieved to see Agnes's confidence seemingly restored. The threat of dismissal now lifted. The Duke acknowledged Alyssa's fondness for Agnes, instructing her to watch over Alyssa more carefully, to tend to her better from now on. Alyssa, uncertain of his intentions, felt she should express some gratitude for the brooch. Agnes, noting the brooch's unique qualities, suggested it might be the work of another race, its edges exquisitely perfect, but she quickly shifted to compliments, declaring the brooch suited Alyssa perfectly. A wave of discomfort washed over Alyssa. She urged Agnes to stop, retracting her earlier impulse towards gratitude, embarrassed by the whole situation. Time passed, and soon the day of her birthday celebration arrived, a significant milestone in her young life. The maids bustled about, preparing for the day. One checked if the return gifts were arranged, another confirmed that all was in place. Inwardly, Alyssa grumbled at the early morning noise and the effort it took to even turn over in her current form. Though her speech was brief and clumsy, she refrained from speaking much to avoid drawing attention. Agnes praised Alyssa's progress in turning over. The maids, ready, awaited Agnes's instructions. Agnes directed them to prepare Alyssa's bath, adding the bath lotion. Someone announced that the dining hall needed urgent assistance, but the maids dismissed her, busy as they were, telling her not to cause trouble. They all left, and Alyssa awoke from her nap. Unsure when she had fallen asleep, she was about to call out when Eris, who was about to wake her, noted she was already awake. Eris inquired about Alyssa's sleep, mentioning she was going out to prepare, addressing someone as your lordship, piquing Alyssa's curiosity. Then Eris cautioned the Duke not to hold Alyssa too tightly, as she was fragile. The Duke assured her of his control. Alyssa felt a surge of surprise and discomfort. Realizing her father was holding her, she wondered where everyone else had gone, especially Agnes. She worried about being seen in her father's arms when Agnes returned. She recalled Eris's words from the previous night, hinting that she would be carried in by her father. Alyssa fretted, frustrated that her nanny hadn't grasped the vital detail she'd tried to communicate, while simultaneously attempting to come to terms with the whole situation. Held awkwardly in her father's arms, Alyssa squirmed. He wasn't holding her right, she thought. He needed to support her neck better. The poor hold irritated her. Alyssa waved her tiny hands, a gesture the Duke interpreted as a sign of hunger. But Alyssa simply wanted him to adjust his grip to cradle her head properly. Misunderstanding, the Duke asked if she'd soiled herself. Mortified by the question, Alyssa felt a fresh wave of frustration at the direction of the conversation. 5 minutes of strained silence ticked by. The Duke broke the silence, asking if her earlier fussing had been a mere whim. Uncomfortable, Alyssa opted for silence, letting him think what he would. Noticing her discomfort, the Duke wondered if she was ill. He commented that she seemed less energetic than usual, a remark that made Alyssa realize her apparent listlessness stemmed from enduring his awkward hold. In her frustration, she considered feigning illness just to communicate the sheer discomfort of his embrace. She wavered, unsure whether to voice her complaint or continue to suffer in silence. Before she could decide, Eris entered, inquiring where the Duke was going as the banquet was about to begin. The Duke explained his concern for Alyssa, pointing out her seemingly pained expression. He urgently requested Eris to summon a physician. However, Eris suggested examining Alyssa first before deciding on the necessity of a doctor. Alyssa thought Eris's expression makes it perfectly clear what she's thinking. Eris reassured the Duke of Alyssa's well-being, but the Duke remained concerned, recalling her earlier crying. Eris explained that the crying was a result of the Duke holding her too tightly. Still seemingly perplexed, the Duke claimed Alyssa had been struggling even before he held her tightly. Eris clarified that the primary issue was the uncomfortable hold, advising that due to Alyssa's fragility, the Duke should ensure proper neck support. Still unsure, the Duke maintained that he believed he had been holding her securely to prevent her from falling. Eris, with a small smile, reminded the Duke that it was almost time for their entrance, suggesting he reposition Alyssa, supporting her head with his arm. She mentioned the signal would come in 10 minutes, at which point they could proceed. The Duke agreed, deciding to fasten Alyssa's brooch. Eris nodded in approval. A bit irritating, Alyssa thought, but he's not doing too badly at learning how to handle me. The Duke sighed, admitting that caring for an infant required more attention than he had initially anticipated. A soldier announced the entrance of Duke Lexiasser and Princess Alyssa G. Draven into the banquet hall. As the Duke carried Alyssa inside, the attendees offered congratulations on the birth of the princess, showering them with gifts such as fabric from Pattaya, noted for its suitability for summer garments. Another guest added that the gift was perfect for Alyssa's birthday, expressing their gratitude. Sitting passively, Alyssa felt a wave of boredom wash over her. With this mountain of gifts, she thought, the ceremony must be nearing its end. Nearby, someone commented on the size of a monster egg, noting its black shell indicated it came from a high-ranking beast. Albert, also present, congratulated the Duke and Princess on the birth of their daughter, explaining that while the world held many precious things to offer her in Draven, he had prepared something more unique. The Duke acknowledged the difficulty in acquiring a monster egg, calling it a truly precious gift from Sir Albert. Alyssa thought, while a monster egg is certainly valuable, it's just a pretty rock to me. Considering I might not live past 9, easily transportable precious metals would be far more useful. Then she noticed something. Alyssa, still nestled in her 2-month-old body, wondered if the man standing before her was the protagonist, Inidio. She had heard that royal guests were expected, but she hadn't anticipated the protagonist himself. Why was he here? She pondered. Duke Claire offered congratulations to Lord Giovanni on the birth of his daughter, mentioning a dangerous hunt involving high-level magical beasts and thanking Duke Giovanni for minimizing the damage, much to the king's satisfaction. Duke Giovanni returned the pleasantries, thanking Duke Claire for his kind words and expressing surprise at his personal attendance. So Alyssa mused, it seemed Duke Claire was the only official envoy sent by the royal family. She found it odd that someone who looked no older than 7 was serving in such a capacity. Duke Claire announced that he had prepared a specialty of the Claire Duchy as a congratulatory gift for the princess. Alyssa briefly entertained the hope that it might be sweets. But when Duke Draven reacted with excitement, she realized it was dice stone. She remembered seeing similar dice stone in a shop window. It was a precious item. Alyssa reflected that if she hadn't spent her money on such things, she wouldn't be in this world. She also thought that Duke Claire was quite handsome, perhaps because he was the protagonist. The protagonist mentioned the daughter of the Draven family. Another person offered blessings for the princess's wisdom and health. Alyssa wondered if the protagonist was trying to say something to her, but dismissed it as her imagination. She wished the event would end soon so she could sleep. Just then, a servant brought forth a gift, announcing the upcoming presentation of a gift from Duke Draven, her father. Alyssa realized her father was also giving a gift. She guessed it might be a portrait of her, which she supposed was acceptable, but she was curious about what it would look like. Hopefully, there wouldn't be anything strange about it. The servant drew back the curtain covering the gift, revealing the painting. The guests began to comment, remarking that placing a brooch on the painting was a unique idea and speculating whether the brooch was named after the flower that shared the princess's name. They also mentioned that crafting such a large brooch must have been quite expensive. This clearly demonstrated the Duke's high regard for his daughter. Upon seeing the painting, Alyssa thought that she could tell a lot of effort had gone into it. Still, if it was a brooch named after the Alyssa flower, she already had one, too many of the same thing. Unsure how to react, she decided to feign sleepiness. Someone commented that Duke Draven seemed to truly adore his daughter. Another agreed, adding that it was nice to see him openly express his affection in front of guests. Alyssa wondered if there was a hidden meaning behind their words. The Duke then addressed the guests, thanking them for their attendance and hoping they enjoyed the provided entertainment. He also offered a toast to the continued glory of the Giovanni family. Meanwhile, a girl commented that Alyssa had said something, which surprised a boy. He questioned what she meant, and the girl noted that Alyssa was moving, thinking she might be waking up. But the boy urged her to be quiet, blaming her voice for waking Alyssa. Alyssa wondered who the unfamiliar voice she had just heard belonged to, as it was a voice she didn't recognize. As she opened her eyes, the nearby girl gasped, noticing that Alyssa had opened her eyes. The boy, equally astonished, commented on Alyssa's golden eyes, calling them utterly captivating. He then called Prince Anaito's attention to Alyssa's reaction, prompting Anaito to sigh. He told the boy that while he didn't expect formal speech, he did expect him to lower his voice. Alyssa, feeling bewildered, wondered what was going on. She noted that commoners weren't allowed in the resting area, so she was puzzled by these unfamiliar children, including the protagonist, suddenly appearing there. The boy commented that while the Duke looked intimidating, Alyssa was incredibly cute and asked Jennifer for her opinion. Jennifer speculated that the Duke must have been adorable at Alyssa's age and expressed particular fascination with Alyssa, especially how she hadn't cried upon waking. Alyssa observed how perceptive these seemingly young children were. The boy, Herman, stated that babies usually only cried when hungry or needing something, prompting Jennifer to call him silly and compare Alyssa's calmness to his constantly crying little cousin. Herman reluctantly agreed with her observation. The names Jennifer and Herman sounded familiar. She recognized them as members of the hero's party and wondered why they were here. Inidio firmly told them that since they had seen her, it was time to leave, but Herman protested, arguing that since no one was guarding the area, they could stay a little longer. Inidio pointed out that sneaking in was against the rules in the first place, and whether or not the area was guarded didn't justify their actions. However, Jennifer retorted that since they had already broken the rules, staying a bit longer wouldn't make much difference. Herman, misinterpreting her words, happily assumed they could continue their visit. Jennifer seconded the idea, urging Inidio to let them stay a while longer. Inidio warned that Duke Claire or Duke Draven might be looking for them, but Jennifer dismissed the concern, explaining that her father was probably busy enjoying some 18-year-old Mudrigosan wine and wouldn't even notice. Herman added that his father had encouraged him to be with them. He reasoned that having the baby around would be more entertaining than being alone. Inidio reluctantly agreed. Captivated by the baby's chubby cheeks, Herman asked if he could touch them, but Jennifer immediately stopped him, scolding him for wanting to touch a baby without washing his hands. Herman tried to defend himself, pointing out that they had already broken the rules, but Inidio explained the gravity of the situation, emphasizing that unclean hands could make the baby sick. Realizing the consequences, Herman quickly backed down, assuring them he didn't want to make Miss Vane ill. Jennifer told Inidio to stop standing guard and join them, but he insisted on keeping watch in case someone came. Jennifer scoffed at his caution, believing that even if they were caught, it wouldn't be a big deal since they were all children of high-ranking nobles, and Inidio was the fourth prince. Herman echoed this sentiment, confident that their genuine desire to see the baby would be forgiven. Suddenly, Alyssa made a babyish sound, capturing Jennifer and Herman's attention. Herman then suggested that if he washed his hands first, touching the baby should be fine. Jennifer commented on his eagerness, admitting that she found the baby irresistibly cute. As Alyssa watched, she found Herman's excitement amusing and thought he was rather cute himself. Herman excitedly pointed out Alyssa's smile to Jennifer. Jennifer, equally captivated, declared the baby adorable. When Alyssa grabbed Herman's hand, he dramatically exclaimed that his heart ached, prompting Jennifer to tease that his head probably hurt too. Alyssa noticed Jennifer's jealous expression and playfully reached out to her as well, making her laugh. Jennifer hesitantly mentioned that she hadn't washed her hands yet, but couldn't help but marvel at how soft Alyssa's hand was. Herman agreed, praising the baby's cuteness. Inidio sternly interrupted them, reminding them that it was time to go. Herman tried to argue for a little more time, but Inidio insisted they had already overstayed their welcome, again chiding Herman for touching the baby without washing his hands. Jennifer laughingly urged Inidio to join them, commenting on how adorable Miss Ravane was. Inidio replied that he had already seen her earlier when he gave Duke Claire's gift. Jennifer countered that seeing her up close was different, hinting that Inidio had followed them because he, too, wanted to see the baby. Jennifer teased that if he was truly worried about getting in trouble, he should have informed Duke Claire beforehand. Inidio hesitated for a moment, then finally admitted his curiosity. Herman, delighted by Inidio's participation, beamed. When Inidio warned that he would report their actions to the Duke and their fathers as soon as they left, Jennifer easily brushed off the threat, teasing him once more. Herman enthusiastically grabbed Inidio's hand and, ignoring his protests, pulled him closer to Alyssa. Inidio, bewildered, questioned their behavior, while Herman, laughing, urged him to drop the pretense. Completely absorbed in the moment, he murmured, "Miss Ravane is truly adorable." As the others commented on how soft Alyssa's hands were, Jennifer recalled how she initially hadn't wanted to come to Draven due to the distance, but seeing the baby made it all worthwhile. Herman enthusiastically agreed, declaring the journey completely worth the effort. Meanwhile, Alyssa was starting to feel hungry and pondered her next move. She considered crying out, but worried about startling the children. She decided to feign sleep, hoping they would quietly leave. Jennifer noticed this, remarking that it looked like the baby was falling asleep. Eris entered the room, calling out to Alyssa and asking if she was still sleeping. Her sudden appearance startled the three children. Upon discovering them, she calmly inquired how they had entered the room, respectfully addressing them as prince and princesses. Jennifer and Herman stammered out an explanation. Just as Inidio was about to introduce himself and explain the situation, Alyssa began to cry. This startled the entire group. Herman panicked, asking why the baby was crying, while Jennifer worried about how to soothe her. Eris quickly assessed that Alyssa was hungry. She gently lifted the baby, informing the children that Princess Travaine needed to be fed. Herman, still reluctant to leave, expressed his desire to stay and play with the baby, but Jennifer clamped a hand over his mouth, politely acknowledging Eris's words. Jennifer tugged Herman away by the collar, despite his continued protests. "You idiot," she hissed. Eris softly soothed Alyssa, calling her miss, and remarked that it seemed she now had older siblings, assuring the baby she would be fed soon. She then delicately broached the subject of what to do with their unexpected guests. Jennifer, mortified, immediately apologized for their intrusion, with Herman stammering out an apology as well. Inidio, filled with guilt, expressed his regret over the situation. The children's fathers also stepped forward to apologize, with Herman's father admitting his failure to properly supervise his son and the prince. Jennifer's father acknowledged his daughter's grave misstep, offering to make amends for their actions with a formal apology as per protocol. He emphasized the value and dignity of the Duke's precious daughter. The Duke, however, remained calm and composed, expressing the complexity of his feelings on the matter. In the resting room, he acknowledged the children's youth, but pointed out that age could not be an absolute excuse. Jennifer's father agreed with the Duke, taking full responsibility. Herman's father echoed the sentiment, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. The Duke, while relieved that nothing serious had occurred, stressed that a mishap could have led to significant problems. He voiced his concern over the potential for an accident involving Alyssa. However, the Duke partially admitted Draven's responsibility for not properly restricting access to the area. Based on Lady Eris's report, he understood that the prince, princess, and Herman meant no harm and were simply playing together cheerfully. Alyssa watched Inidio's expression, wondering if he was implying the children hadn't enjoyed themselves. But the matter remained unresolved even when Duke Claire intervened. The Duke pointed out the inappropriateness of discussing the fault of an unfortunate incident at such an important occasion. He finally decided to declare it a shared fault on both sides and formally resolve the matter. The Duke, representing Duke Draven's position, expressed his gratitude for everyone's understanding and cooperation in the matter. Just then, a maid entered to inform them that the evening festivities were about to begin. Surprised by the passage of time, the Duke immediately directed everyone to move to the sponsors' hall. The following scene depicts the sponsors' hall. Herman excitedly cried out about looking at the stars, but Jennifer told him to behave. Melissa was pleased to see the young ones enjoying themselves, but Alyssa didn't share the sentiment. A servant announced the commencement of the final event, asking everyone to direct their attention to the night sky. Regarding the skyway, Herman, awestruck by the sight, urged Jennifer to look at the sky, but she replied that she already was. The image of a dragon appeared in the sky. Herman excitedly exclaimed that it was a dragon, and Jennifer remarked that it might be a golden dragon. It was the symbol of Draven, and she marveled as the dragon breathed fire. Alyssa thought to herself that normally she would detest cold stares, but somehow, this time, it felt filled with affection. Perhaps it was the night, making her feel particularly sentimental. Ernest reminded her to look at the sky. One by one, people began to comment, marveling at the beautiful spectacle before them. They noticed an image of Alyssa appear in the sky, much like the portrait they had seen earlier. They praised the Duke's love for his daughter, remarking that even an imperial princess's first birthday wouldn't have such a grand celebration. Alyssa reflected that she never thought anyone would do something like this for her. Eris informed the Duke that the young lady seemed happy, but running around was dangerous. The Duke inquired about Alyssa's whereabouts, and Eris handed her over to him. The Duke held Alyssa, and Herman commented that Alyssa was moving. The Duke remarked that magic couldn't fully capture true beauty. Alyssa contemplated her feelings. She recalled the days when all she wanted was to survive and escape. Though she wanted to leave the past behind, the Duke, whom she thought she had abandoned, reached out to her once more. The Duke apologized and expressed his love, saying he wanted to be a good father. However, Alyssa remembered how he had wanted to name her Snake and planned to kill her on her 9th birthday. She thought that she didn't love him and had been trying to escape her fate by keeping her distance. The Duke thanked her, and Alyssa wondered if there was a way to survive alongside her father. Herman's father thanked their host for allowing the children to play with Alyssa. Herman eagerly told Agnes that he wanted to touch Alyssa's cheek. Agnes agreed, but instructed them to go to the room first. Jennifer scolded Herman, saying he shouldn't address Alyssa by her name without permission. Herman argued that even though Alyssa couldn't talk, she would surely allow it. Agnes placed Alyssa in the cradle, and Jennifer marveled at the softness of her cheeks. Herman excitedly declared he wanted to take a bite. Agnes commented on how adorable Alyssa was, saying that just looking at her was fulfilling. Meanwhile, Alyssa felt embarrassed by Agnes's words, especially in front of such young children. She noticed that even Alyssa, the protagonist from her perspective, seemed surprised. It was late, and both Jennifer and Herman had fallen asleep. As Alyssa herself grew drowsy, Agnes gently picked her up, saying it was time to return to her room. As Agnes carried Alyssa, they encountered Inidio standing nearby. Alyssa wondered what Inidio was thinking, noticing the expression on his face. Inidio, caught by Alyssa's gaze, realized he'd been thinking about her. Alyssa recalled the original protagonist's personality. He never spared a glance for anyone he deemed insignificant. Renowned for his innate abilities, he was always aloof, rarely displaying emotion. She began to suspect his ability might be some form of precognition. The next morning, a carriage stood ready for departure. Jennifer's father directed the servants loading the luggage, announcing their imminent leave. He offered his congratulations once more to Duke Draven on the birth of his daughter and wished them a safe journey. Meanwhile, Herman lay dramatically sprawled on the floor, refusing to leave. He declared his intention to stay and live with Alyssa. His father gently coaxed him, reminding him that his mother awaited them at home. Alyssa watched silently, observing Herman's determined expression. Herman's father assured him they would visit Alyssa again. Herman insisted on a promise, and his father obliged. Gazing out the window, his thoughts lingering on Alyssa, he promised to return, wishing her good health and safety. However, Duke Draven sternly declared that no one from Duke Claire's household was permitted to visit again. Eris acknowledged the order. Later, Agnes carried Alyssa to see the gifts, which had been moved to the resting room. Among them was a painting from her father. Agnes remarked that while the painting wasn't as lovely as Alyssa, it was a heartfelt gift. Alyssa silently agreed, thinking a second glance at the painting wouldn't be amiss. Time passed, seasons changed, and Alyssa steadily grew. Agnes encouraged her to eat, playing the train game. Alyssa contemplated her physical growth and the developmental milestones she had reached. Sitting up, pulling herself to a standing position while holding onto something, and walking while holding onto furniture. Today, Alyssa attempted to walk on her own for the first time. Eris called out to her excitedly, and Agnes cheered her on, praising her progress. Alyssa concentrated on her steps, noting that the soft carpet made walking more challenging. Eris marveled at how well Alyssa was doing, and Agnes found her tightly clenched fists adorable. Agnes added that Alyssa was truly amazing and believed she would be talking soon. Alyssa breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the days of incomprehensible baby talk were coming to an end. A system message appeared, revealing her fate. On her 9th birthday, she would be brutally torn apart and killed by her out-of-control father. Alyssa considered her progress, acknowledging that she had been accelerating her development discreetly. She speculated that this precocious growth might not arouse suspicion, given her Draven bloodline. In any case, it was advantageous for her to prepare for the challenges ahead. Alyssa reflected on her progress, noting that her initial focus on survival had shifted to thoughts of the potential talents inherited from her Draven lineage. She imagined herself possessing prodigious skills in swordsmanship, magic, or intellect, though she held doubts about the latter, given the circumstances. Despite her doubts, she acknowledged that her mindset had significantly improved compared to her initial fear. Her thoughts were interrupted by Eris announcing an arrival. Alyssa realized her transformation was largely due to her father's continued visits, a stark contrast to her expectations. The Duke asked Eris if Alyssa had experienced any problems while he was away. Eris replied that there hadn't been any problems, but rather a wonderful event. Alyssa had taken 10 steps on her own that morning. The Duke, brimming with excitement, asked if she had fallen. Eris assured him that while there had been a few precarious moments, Alyssa had quickly regained her balance. Praising Alyssa, the Duke decided to reward her for taking 10 steps without tumbling, much to Alyssa's delight. Her father then presented her with another brooch, as he often did. "It's always a flower-shaped brooch," she thought to herself. Agnes admired the piece, commenting on its subtle crimson hue, explaining that it was a ruby treated with the breath of deep crimson flames. The brooch was designed like a flower calyx, giving it a vivid, three-dimensional effect. She noticed, however, that the petals were sharper due to the delicate craftsmanship. Agnes added that Alyssa could wear it when she turned 8. He kept repeating Papa while pleading with her to play with him. He eagerly asked what she wanted to do with him, the word Papa echoing with each repetition. After much effort, Alyssa finally managed to say Papa. Overjoyed, the Duke praised her for uttering her first word and promised her a reward for the accomplishment. He told her that because she said Papa, she would receive another gift. Agnes then presented the new gift, a brooch crafted not with a gemstone, but with the feathers of a red flying beast. She admired the brooch's craftsmanship, explaining its unique qualities, making it a special gift for Alyssa. After the excitement subsided, Agnes suggested it was time for Alyssa's nap. Gently scooping Alyssa into her arms, she laid her down to rest. Alyssa, feeling utterly content, hoped this happiness would last. As she slept, she heard a strange noise in the middle of the night. She wondered if the window was open, but found it closed. The noise continued, leaving Alyssa confused and frightened. She wondered if it was a ghost, then felt something brush against her hand. Hearing her cry, Agnes rushed to check on her. The Duke also came to Alyssa's side, taking her into his arms. Still frightened, Alyssa called out, Papa. Agnes remarked that the young lady had been seeking the Duke's comfort frequently lately, unsure why. The The Duke asked Alyssa if being with Papa felt good. Agnes, noticing this, wondered if Alyssa no longer wanted to be held by her. Alyssa felt a pang of guilt, thinking it was better for her father to comfort her, believing he could ward off ghosts. Agnes suggested changing Alyssa into her outdoor clothes. Once Alyssa was ready, the Duke took her outside, asking if she wanted to see the autumn leaves. Alyssa smiled, taking in the beauty of the autumn foliage. But then, Alyssa heard the strange noise again, and fear gripped her. The Duke, noticing her apprehension, asked what was wrong. Eris, seeing Alyssa's unease, asked if she was afraid of the height. Alyssa thought to herself that even with her father, she kept hearing the ghostly sound. Agnes gave her a toy, and the Duke summoned flames from his hand, remarking that it had been a while since he had used magic like this. Alyssa was amazed. She realized then that her father could use magic. It was the first time she had seen it up close. Eris worriedly asked if this was safe for Alyssa, but the Duke assured her that unlike normal fire, this magical flame produced no heat. Alyssa, mesmerized, longed to touch the flames, but the Duke warned her that fire was dangerous and she shouldn't touch it. However, Alyssa persisted, calling out Papa. The Duke hesitated, but allowed her to touch the flame, explaining that while fire was dangerous, this one wouldn't hurt her. As Alyssa touched the flame, it unexpectedly flared, startling the Duke. As the Duke tried to extinguish the flame, it refused to die down. Eris urgently called for Agnes. Agnes quickly grabbed Alyssa, pulling her to safety. The flame moved towards Alyssa, alarming both Eris and Agnes. Alyssa heard a voice, realizing something was wrong, a situation that resonated with her. She then thought it was a ghost, and in response, her magic began to manifest from her hands. The Duke, panicked, slammed his hands onto the ground. The flames finally died down. Alyssa heard another voice speaking incomprehensible words and cried out, "Papa, spirit." The Duke approached her, asking what was wrong, but Alyssa struggled to explain due to her pronunciation difficulties. Frustrated, she wondered if she should just tell him what happened. Alyssa heard the voice again, uttering indiscernible words, and stammered, "Papa, ghost, ghost." The Duke, perplexed, thought it might indeed be a spirit. He carried Alyssa into a room where she fell asleep. In her dreams, Alyssa heard another voice ask, "Are you all right? Who is it?" Alyssa recalled her father telling her about spirits. She realized what she had thought was a ghost was actually a wind spirit. Normally, spirits remained in the spirit realm, rarely venturing into the human world. There were two exceptions: when they were forcibly bound or summoned through affinity. Alyssa wondered why the spirit was lingering around her. The Duke connected the earlier magical flames to the spirit, suspecting a synergy between fire and wind. However, he found it strange, as spirits typically feared dragon power, making affinity with spirits rare in their family. Alyssa thought to herself that she hadn't even considered the possibility of a spirit before. Recalling how rare spirit users were in the original story, she felt relieved it wasn't a ghost. Impressed, the Duke remarked that Alyssa had already summoned a spirit, acknowledging her remarkable ability, but also pointing out that she was too young to control such power. Inwardly, Alyssa frustratedly blamed the spirits for causing trouble. Seeing Alyssa's fear of the spirit, the Duke told her she had been awake for too long and reassured her that he would protect her. As the tension subsided, Alyssa began to feel drowsy, ready for rest. The wind spirit mage, Arod Cephal, reported to the Duke, confirming Alyssa's strong affinity with spirits, particularly wind spirits. He explained that while further testing was needed, Alyssa might surpass him in the future. However, he pointed out that Alyssa was too young to handle such power, and spirits usually avoided showing interest in children due to their fragility. Worried, the Duke asked Arod for advice. Arod warned that if Alyssa continued to fear spirits, it could negatively impact her development. The Duke admitted this was the first time he had seen Alyssa. So afraid, Arod Cephal suggested using the method he had mentioned earlier, and the Duke asked if it would truly harm Alyssa. Arod reassured him it wouldn't, claiming it was merely a nominal seal, causing no harm. Alyssa, overhearing this, wondered what exactly was being sealed and if it was related to the spirits. She reflected that while she was initially scared of the spirits, she now felt fine as long as she didn't acknowledge them. She began to question if there would be any side effects and when the seal would be lifted. She felt a strong urge to object to the decision. Meanwhile, the spirit's voice expressed confusion and worry, implying it meant no harm. Arid Sephal reassured them they weren't sealing the spirit, but temporarily sealing Alyssa's affinity that attracted them. The spirits expressed surprise at this. Arid Sephal scolded the spirits for their actions, explaining that Alyssa had been frightened by them. He told them that instead of complaining about the situation, they should apologize to Alyssa, as it was their breach of protocol that led to her being sealed. Alyssa silently pondered the situation, surprised that the spirits seemed to have some semblance of a conscience. The spirits, a confused murmur amongst themselves, questioned whether they should apologize to the young lady. Arod Sephal quickly dismissed their worries, pointing out there was nothing to apologize for, as Alyssa was still a babe barely a year old. He urged the spirits to return swiftly, warning them not to dally. Turning to the Duke, he explained that the spirits drawn to Alyssa were more persistent than anticipated, and the sealing ritual needed to be performed as soon as possible. The Duke nodded in agreement, his trust placed firmly in Arod Sephal. Recalling past hunts for high-ranking magical beasts alongside the late Duke Dravain, Arod Sephal reassured the Duke, promising a swift and efficient ritual. With a decisive air, he announced he would begin the preparations. Alyssa, pondering his words, felt a prickle of unease. He seemed kind enough, but she sensed something hidden beneath the surface. Noticing her thoughtful expression, the Duke inquired if she was still frightened of the spirits. Alyssa assured him her fear had subsided, mentioning old Arod Sephal's promise to help keep the spirits away. Sensing her lingering apprehension, the Duke confessed his own concerns about the sealing process, but reiterated his faith in Arod Sephal's skill as a spirit mage. He was certain everything would be all right. Inwardly, Alyssa acknowledged that her fear had lessened now that she knew the spirits weren't malevolent, but a hesitation about the sealing ritual remained. The Duke, perceptive as ever, picked up on her hesitation. Sometimes, he mused, he felt Alyssa understood everything he said. He sighed wistfully, wishing his daughter could speak. Alyssa thought to herself that she did understand everything he said, that she could even speak, but the truth of it was a secret she couldn't share with anyone. Agnes declared her intention to sleep beside Alyssa that night. While she couldn't chase away the spirits, she encouraged Alyssa to sleep soundly without worry. Agnes settled into the bed next to Alyssa. Alyssa noticed a faint stirring of Agnes's hair. She wondered briefly if a window had been left open, but quickly dismissed the thought. It was the dead of winter, after all. Suspicion fell upon the spirits. A spirit materialized, its form shimmering with an air of guilt. It stammered an apology, insisting it hadn't meant to frighten her. As the spirit hovered awkwardly, clutching what appeared to be a small, levitating card, Alyssa surmised it had come to make amends. A sudden thought struck her. Most children her age couldn't properly speak, let alone read or write. Perhaps the spirits had discovered her secret. "Do you?" "No, I can talk," she ventured, her voice barely a whisper. The spirit's reaction confirmed her suspicion. It admitted to noticing her practicing her speech. Panic flared within Alyssa, the gravity of the situation sinking in. But the spirit, sensing her distress, offered a comforting assurance, promising to keep her secret safe. Observing the spirit's demeanor, Alyssa felt a flicker of gratitude for its perceptiveness. It had likely noticed her secret due to her earlier fumble while attempting to fasten her buttons. Reflecting on their actions, she realized they weren't entirely bad, having gone out of their way to apologize. A wave of warmth washed over her, and she offered her forgiveness. The spirit expressed its gratitude, then hesitantly asked her to reconsider the sealing ritual. Surprised by the request, Alyssa acknowledged it, saying she would consider it. Looking at the spirit, now seeming as harmless as a pet, she felt a wave of tiredness wash over her. Alyssa lay down, bidding the spirit good night, and drifted off to sleep. The next morning, the household bustled with activity. Servants hurried about, preparing for the day's affairs, urging each other to move quickly. Meanwhile, Arod Sephal arrived at the palace, once again reassuring the Duke. He confidently declared there was no need for worry, that everything would proceed smoothly. He inquired whether the Duke had greeted the princess yet, to which the Duke admitted he hadn't. Noticing Arod's meticulous attention to every detail. Arod Cephal remarked, as he prepared for the ritual, that old age brought wrinkles and endless fussing. He assured the Duke that everything was nearly ready, confirming that only the cleansing of the room remained. When asked how the Duke was comforting Alyssa, Arod skillfully redirected the conversation back to himself. Alyssa, overhearing this exchange, inwardly wondered why Arod always seemed to make himself the center of attention. The Duke turned to Alyssa and asked if she had slept well. Her sweet papa, in response, brought a smile to his face. He promised her a gift. Agnes, noticing the clasp on the brooch intended for Alyssa was a hook rather than a pin, remarked that it was better suited to protect delicate fabrics. However, she expressed concern about the sealing ritual, questioning whether it was truly safe for Alyssa. The Duke, though hesitant, reassured her that everything would be all right. Agnes, deeply worried, asked sorrowfully why the spirits were so drawn to Alyssa. Alyssa, observing Agnes's emotional state, thought she was a particularly tearful person. Agnes spoke to Alyssa tenderly, expressing her love and concern. Arod Cephal announced it was time for the sealing ritual. He drew a magic circle on the floor, ensuring everything was prepared. At that moment, the spirits whispered to Alyssa. He confirmed the preparations were complete and requested the Duke entrust Alyssa to him for the ritual. The Duke carried Alyssa towards Arod Cephal, but she resisted. Arod attempted to reassure the Duke, emphasizing that the sealing ritual was the best way to protect Alyssa from the spirits. He explained that even if they drove away the current spirits, others would eventually be drawn to her due to her strong affinity, leading to further torment. Held in her father's arms, Alyssa contemplated her situation. She regretted not speaking up sooner, thinking that if she had, perhaps her father wouldn't be so worried. However, she hesitated to reveal her secret, fearing it might expose the truth that she wasn't his biological daughter. Despite her inner turmoil, she felt a deep connection with the Duke in that moment, believing their hearts were aligned. The Duke formally addressed Arod Cephal, but then switched to the more personal Uncle Arod, firmly declaring that the sealing ritual would not proceed. Instead, he assured Arod he would pay him double the agreed-upon sum and invited him to rest at the ducal estate, considering his long journey. Alyssa was overjoyed by her father's decision, silently praising him as the best. Arod Cephal protested the Duke's decision, his confusion and frustration evident. He reminded the Duke that it was his own letter that had requested his assistance. Arod compared the situation to parents refusing to give a sick child necessary medicine simply because the child disliked it, emphasizing that children are fickle and resistant to unfamiliar things. He argued that Alyssa's refusal wasn't a rational decision and insisted the Duke could entrust her to him for the sealing. He claimed it was still the best course of action. The Duke started to respond, but Arod interrupted, accusing him of negligence for allowing Alyssa to remain exposed to the spirit's influence. He warned that inaction could even be considered a form of indirect harm. The spirits earnestly pleaded with Alyssa to stop the sealing ritual. Expressing their sorrow, the spirits urged her to avoid the ritual. They promised her that if she chose not to proceed, they and other spirits would stay away from her, even warning others to do the same. Alyssa, noticing the spirits' sadness, felt conflicted, wondering why they were so opposed to the sealing. As she interacted with them, a system message suddenly appeared, announcing that a choice event had been activated. Alyssa recognized the message, recalling previous experiences when she received her name and leveled up. The system displayed that the conditions had been met, her character level was evolving, and latent abilities were being unlocked. Alyssa noticed the notification, realizing it pertained to her earlier interaction with the spirit. It was as if the system was telling her that the player's choices were based on her actions, prompting her to decide what to do next. With newfound resolve, Alyssa softly addressed the spirit as a friend, assuring it that she had forgiven it and wouldn't be frightened by its presence. Touched, the spirit called her Little One in gratitude. Meanwhile, Arod Cephal observed Alyssa regain her composure and smile. However, puzzled by Arod's sudden change in demeanor, Alyssa refused to proceed with the sealing ritual. Alyssa felt her father standing protectively behind her. To her surprise, Erod approached, not with aggression, but with a blessing. He praised her as impressive and extraordinary, leaving Alyssa both bewildered and curious by his unexpected reaction. The spirit affectionately called Alyssa Little Sprout. She asked the spirit if it was all right, and it reassured her that everything was fine. The Duke, a mixture of relief and concern swirling within him, expressed his complex emotions, unsure whether to thank or scold Alyssa. He remarked that she seemed to have experienced a great deal of fright lately, asking if she had been terribly scared. He then instructed Agnes to have the servants tidy the room, which she promptly did. Turning to Erod Cephal, the Duke reproached him for going too far. Erod, however, cryptically replied that sometimes deceiving one's own people was necessary to deceive the enemy. This left Alyssa perplexed, and she began to wonder if she had been deliberately misled. Questions flooded her mind. Had they truly deceived her? If so, why? When did this plan begin? What was its purpose? Just as the conversation seemed to be shifting to other matters, Erod Cephal suggested tea. The Duke sighed and agreed, leading him away. Attempting to unravel the truth behind these mysterious actions, the three of them settled into chairs with their tea. Erod Cephal complimented the rare, 15-year-old Aduran tea, acknowledging the Duke's refined taste and declaring such a delicacy truly fitting for the House of Dravain. Sipping his tea, the Duke requested Erod Cephal to explain the sealing ritual again in detail, as Alyssa might not have fully understood. Erod Cephal remarked on how much the Duke had changed, recalling how 4 years prior, the Duke had expressed no desire for children. Intrigued by this observation, the Duke pressed for further explanation of the ritual. Erod Cephal began by explaining that spirits rarely approached young children, the true reason being that forming a pact with a spirit meant communicating with it. To do so required exceptional willpower, wisdom, and control, fueled by magical energy. The Duke, grasping the concept, indicated his understanding. Erod Cephal continued, revealing that while it was commonly believed spirits approached children around the age of 7, the truth was different. The Duke urged Erod Cephal to elaborate. Erod Cephal explained that it wasn't the age of 7 itself that attracted spirits, but the control a child gained after that age. A child who could attract a spirit had to possess the potential to control it. When Erod Cephal received the Duke's letter, he suspected Alyssa was exceptionally gifted, but there were inconsistencies in the letter. The Duke mentioned Alyssa's fear of spirits, and that she wasn't particularly exceptional compared to her peers. The Duke, surprised, defended his daughter, but Erod Cephal claimed he had read the letter carefully, including all the Duke's praises. He explained that the control required to manage a spirit demanded more than ordinary intelligence. Considering the unique traits of the Dravain lineage, he was curious and decided to meet Alyssa himself. Upon observation, he confirmed his suspicion. She was merely startled by the spirit's sudden appearance. However, Erod Cephal's second suspicion remained unclear. Erod Cephal remarked that Alyssa, despite being of Dravain blood and chosen by the spirits, seemed remarkably ordinary, just as the Duke had described. He admitted to deliberately suggesting the sealing ritual, as extreme situations sometimes triggered latent abilities. The Duke, his displeasure evident, inquired what would have happened had Alyssa not refused the ritual. Erod Cephal replied that he would have proceeded, explaining that the seal would naturally dissipate within 5 years. The Duke criticized this approach, but Erod Cephal simply stated that it was his nature. He then brought up the brooch the Duke had given Alyssa, the Alyssa flower brooch, noting that it appeared to be crafted with Albert's gemstones. Admiring its craftsmanship, he inquired about the artisan who had made it, pointing out its unique design. The Duke acknowledged the brooch's quality, but remained evasive about the craftsman's identity. Meanwhile, Alyssa felt a perplexing sense of familiarity with the brooch. Erod Cephal announced that he had to attend to other matters, and advised Alyssa to wait until she was older to form a contract with the spirits, as her body was still too frail. The Duke concurred with postponing the contract. Alyssa, relieved that the matter was resolved, worried about how her newfound eloquence would be perceived. However, her concerns proved unfounded when the Duke praised her exceptional ability, calling her gifted. Agnes enthusiastically agreed, further bolstering Alyssa's confidence. Alyssa reflected that her worries had been unnecessary, deciding to think positively now that she could speak freely and had made a good friend. As Agnes helped Alyssa into bed, she mentioned a dream she'd had about Alyssa, saying to someone, "I'll think about it some more." Goodbye, and sleep well," which mirrored Alyssa's words from earlier that day. Feeling sleepy, Alyssa asked Agnes to turn off the light. Agnes wished her good night. Alyssa thought about being more careful in the future. The next morning, the Duke reminded everyone that Alyssa's first birthday was only 2 months away, and insisted that the celebration should be grander than usual. The maids bustled about preparing for the event, one mentioning a shortage of ingredients, another discussing the fabric for Alyssa's dress, and a third confirming that the invitations were ready. Mrs. Harris commended their hard work. Alyssa, observing the flurry of activity surrounding her birthday party, noted that she didn't see many people besides Agnes, who was assigned to her. Agnes diligently tutored her, asking Alyssa to read a flashcard with the word flammable and explaining that it meant something that catches fire easily. Alyssa wondered if Agnes was working so hard because of what the older spirit mage had said. She recalled Erod Cephal's words, mentioning that Agnes had learned to speak and familiarity with letters would help her quickly. Soon, the Duke arrived, observing Alyssa's studies, and then Agnes told Alyssa she had something for her and asked her to come along. Alyssa followed Agnes, leaving the Duke. A spirit approached Alyssa, and she hesitantly asked if it was there to make a deal with her. The spirit confirmed and introduced itself as Sippy. Alyssa wondered if she could make a request, and the spirit agreed. She then said that other spirits could come and go as they pleased, and the spirit said that was fine. To herself, Alyssa thought, surprised, that even without a formal contract, the spirits were already heeding her requests. She pondered how an extra character could look so good, wondering if all her 9-point dice roll bonus had gone into appearance. As she mused, the spirit warned that someone was coming. The Duke and Agnes arrived with gifts, Agnes explaining that they were early birthday presents for Alyssa. Although there was a designated time for gift-giving during the banquet, Alyssa noticed the adjacent room had already been transformed into a storage space overflowing with presents. She wondered if this was all thanks to her father, as it was the first time she had received so many congratulations. Agnes began reading the gift list, the first for Marquis Rodras, wishing Lord and Lady Dravain good health and peace. The gift was a music box with a heart-shaped gemstone inlay. Agnes remarked that it would play beautiful melodies while Alyssa slept. Next, Agnes mentioned a gift from the workshop, a token of gratitude for a recent order. It turned out to be a handcrafted teddy bear. The Duke, curious about the workshop's capabilities, watched as Alyssa's attention was drawn to a necklace around the bear's neck. Agnes unclasped the bear's necklace, revealing an Elisa flower crafted from amethyst. She marveled at how impressive it was. Then Agnes read the note accompanying another gift. It was a flower pot, and Alyssa was intrigued by the sender's anonymity. The pot contained blue-rooted Elisa seeds, native to the north, which Agnes pointed out were quite beautiful. The next gift caused a letter to slip from Agnes's hand. The Duke, upon reading it, exclaimed Herman's name. Alyssa remembered Herman as the boy who had attended her birthday celebration. She wondered why his name had been concealed. She recalled Herman's words about wanting to live with her and visit again. This reminded her of her father's earlier order to refuse Duke Clear's visit. Alyssa wondered if Herman's actions stemmed from affection for her, puzzled as to why a boy would go to such lengths for a 5-year-old. The Duke, her father, asked if she had met Herman, but Alyssa chose not to answer directly, hoping to avoid exacerbating any misunderstanding that might cause Herman further trouble. Instead, she asked her father who Herman was. Seeing Alyssa's innocent expression, Agnes commented on how adorable she looked. Alyssa then uttered the word love, surprising both her father and Agnes. The Duke questioned whether he had heard correctly, while Agnes, equally astonished, offered him congratulations. The Duke embraced Alyssa, expressing his love for her, confirming the depth of his affection for his daughter. Alyssa reflected on how the mere utterance of the word love could evoke such powerful emotions. Overjoyed, the Duke promised her a special gift, something even more wonderful than an ordinary present. Alyssa eagerly agreed, requesting a better one. Taken aback by her enthusiasm, the Duke, attempting to match her excitement, began apologizing for his awkward behavior. He promised to include all the gift givers in the future, asking for her forgiveness. Meanwhile, a spirit spoke to Alyssa about baby items in the next room, hinting at something related to the gifts or the situation in the adjacent room. Alyssa read the letter Herman had sent with his gift. She realized the lengths he had gone to in order to see her. The first letter expressed his eagerness to visit and ensure her well-being. The second revealed his disappointment at not receiving her father's permission to visit. The third conveyed his sadness and confusion over the Duke's refusal. Alyssa pondered Herman's feelings. She considered how heartbreaking it must be for a 5-year-old to face rejection without understanding the reason. She empathized with Herman, understanding how difficult it must be to process such emotions at such a young age. The Duke apologized to Alyssa, promising never to repeat the same mistake. Alyssa watched as her father reflected on his actions. This time, she decided to let it go. The next morning, Eris informed Alyssa that a letter had arrived from Duke Clear. The letter, written by Herman, expressed his joy at finally receiving the Duke's permission to visit Alyssa. However, due to the Duke's work, Herman couldn't visit just yet, but he assured Alyssa that he would. He was definitely going to attend her birthday party with Jennifer. Herman mentioned that Jennifer thought Alyssa might not remember them, as she was too young when they first met, but he hoped she would. Though initially saddened, Herman now understood and looked forward to playing with Alyssa at her birthday party. He planned to arrive early so they could have more time together. Alyssa noticed her father's expression and wondered if he would be kinder to Herman this time. She realized her birthday was fast approaching. Despite the busyness of the preparations, her father and Agnes seemed to be acting strangely. Agnes suggested a brooch that would perfectly complement Alyssa's dress. But the Duke disagreed, arguing that a different, more dazzling brooch would be more fitting. Agnes countered that it would be too ostentatious, but the Duke insisted that no luxury was too much for Alyssa. Alyssa was puzzled by their obsession over such a small detail. As the time for the guests' arrival drew near, Alyssa noticed that Eris looked busy and tired. She thought that after all this was over, she should give Eris a long vacation. A spirit reminded Alyssa that Agnes was coming. Agnes entered and asked Alyssa if she was bored being in her room all the time. She told Alyssa that the party preparations were almost complete and suggested she come out to see. Alyssa agreed, and they went out together. Agnes said excitedly that since it was Alyssa's first birthday, many people had said they would come, and there might be more guests than expected. Alyssa pondered why so many people would come to celebrate her birthday, especially since it was just an extra's birthday. She wondered if more people were coming than for her birth celebration. Alyssa observed her current status in the system. She was still classified as an extra, and she contemplated the implications of this label. According to the system, character ranks were divided into 5 tiers, each based on the character's importance to the main plot. Alyssa used the story of Cinderella as a reference to understand this ranking system. For instance, minor characters like the postman or Cinderella's father were classified as extras, while characters like the stepmother and stepsisters were considered supporting characters. Those like the fairy godmother, who had a significant impact on the plot, were ranked as important supporting characters. And main characters like Cinderella and the prince were given the highest rank of protagonist. This made Alyssa realize that to raise her rank, she had to have a greater impact on the main story, as the rank was determined more by a character's importance to the narrative than their stats or abilities. Alyssa concluded that her fate was intertwined with the role she played in the story. This would determine whether she could rise in status within the system. Alyssa pondered her identity and lineage. Despite being the only daughter of the Dravain ducal family, a descendant of dragons, she was initially just an extra in the story. She now understood why she didn't remember being the Duchess of Dravain. The main story only began after the Duchess's death, which explained why she had no memories associated with that role. Alyssa contemplated the grim reality of her fate. The main story would begin when the protagonist, Andy Teo, turned 14, while she would only be 10. Although she had a good relationship with her father now, the unavoidable truth was that she was destined to die at the age of 9, killed by her own father, driven mad. She realized this event would break him after he regained his sanity. To prevent such a tragedy, she resolved to raise her rank as soon as possible. She didn't know what rank she needed to achieve to alter her destiny, but she believed that as her abilities grew, her fate would become clearer, revealing a solution. However, she also realized that to achieve this, she needed to grow quickly. Lost in thought, Alyssa was startled when Agnes reminded her that climbing the stairs alone was still too difficult and offered to carry her up, suggesting she try again later. Alyssa felt a pang of frustration at her inability to conquer even a single step. She wondered how long it would take her to grow up and raise her rank. Agnes informed her that tomorrow was the day the young nobles were visiting and preparations were in full swing. Agnes also mentioned that the guest rooms had been arranged next to Alyssa's room and asked if she was excited. Alyssa was surprised her father had allowed such an arrangement. Just then, a maid requested Agnes's help with hanging curtains as she couldn't manage it alone. Agnes agreed, but first sought Alyssa's permission. Alyssa readily assented. Agnes assured her she would be right next door and would come immediately if anything happened. Alyssa noted how frantically busy everyone seemed to be. At that moment, the Duke entered, calling for Alyssa. She thought, what unfortunate timing, with Agnes not here. Upon arriving, the Duke inquired about Agnes's whereabouts, expressing concern that Alyssa might be bored playing alone. Alyssa reflected that even the most endearing gestures could lose their charm if overused, and she would have to be more careful in the future. Meanwhile, in another room, the maid thanked Agnes for her help, to which Agnes humbly replied that it was all thanks to Alyssa. When Agnes returned to Alyssa, she was surprised to see the Duke there. He pointed out that Agnes had been assisting other maids quite frequently lately. Agnes apologized, but the Duke seemed displeased, stating that this was the third time he had witnessed such behavior. He asked if she truly intended to correct her actions, and Agnes apologized again. Alyssa considered the situation. She acknowledged that while a personal maid performing other duties could be problematic, she had indeed given Agnes permission to help the other maids. She understood that Agnes might feel guilty about her comfortable workload while others struggled. Alyssa also realized Agnes had formed bonds with the other maids. However, the Duke expressed his disapproval, questioning whether such camaraderie should interfere with Agnes's primary responsibilities. Agnes apologized and promised it would never happen again. But the Duke doubted whether she, as a maid, could easily change her ways. He then suggested that perhaps it was time for Alyssa to have a dedicated noble maid. Agnes agreed, acknowledging that it was indeed time for Alyssa to have a proper attendant. Alyssa thought to herself that high-ranking noble children were typically cared for by noble maids, while she, until now, had simply been under Agnes's care. The Duke informed her that he had already selected a suitable candidate to attend to her, likely starting from her birthday. Alyssa was taken aback by this sudden decision, wondering if Agnes had truly fallen out of favor. Agnes asked if she should begin preparing the handover from tomorrow, but the Duke dismissed the idea, saying there was nothing specific to hand over. Agnes attempted to explain that Alyssa was different from other children her age and that there were certain matters requiring a handover, but the Duke insisted that a maid's virtue lay in obedience. Agnes acquiesced. Alyssa felt a knot of unease in her stomach, wondering if Agnes was being abruptly dismissed because of her. Guilt and confusion warred within her. The Duke then told Agnes that her grandfather, Carlos B. Manson, had been a knight under the previous Duke Trevani. Alyssa was surprised by the mention of Agnes's family, unsure why the Duke was bringing it up now. The Duke continued his explanation, revealing that his father had never employed non-nobles as knights. An investigation had uncovered that Agnes's grandfather hailed from a fallen noble family. To honor Carlos B. Emson's loyalty and sacrifice in service to the previous Duke, the current Duke decided to bestow the title of Baron upon the Emson family. This elevation made Agnes Lady Emson, and since a noblewoman couldn't serve as a maid, the Duke appointed her as an official attendant. Deeply moved, Agnes expressed her gratitude for the unexpected change in her status. Accepting the Duke's decree, she assured him that she would conduct herself appropriately in her new role as an official attendant. Having fully impressed upon her the importance of her new position, the Duke departed, reminding Agnes of her responsibilities. After he left, Agnes turned to Alyssa, expressing her gratitude and promising to work even harder, ensuring she would never bring shame upon her new station. Alyssa, trusting Agnes implicitly, responded positively. Meanwhile, Jennifer and Herman were engaged in a hushed conversation, Jennifer scolding Herman for running. Such behavior, she declared, was unseemly. Herman, in a playful tone, mentioned Jennifer's earlier reprimand from the Duke for rushing to see Alyssa, suggesting that if they were already in trouble, a little more wouldn't hurt. Jennifer, surprised by Herman's attentiveness, watched as he excitedly, almost urgently, called out Alyssa's name. Jennifer chastised Herman for shouting, explaining that he might frighten Alyssa. She demonstrated the proper way to greet the young girl, lowering her voice and addressing Alyssa formally. Herman, feeling slighted, grumbled about not being the first to greet Alyssa, but Jennifer remained firm, insisting he lower his voice. At that moment, Herman's father intervened, instructing Herman to be quiet. Alyssa noticed her father's continued discomfort with the children's visit, but maintained a polite demeanor. Herman's father apologized for their earlier-than-expected arrival. He addressed Alyssa affectionately, complimenting her adorable appearance. A lady accompanying them also greeted Alyssa, expressing similar admiration for her charm and sweetness. Herman's father stepped aside, allowing the children to interact. Before leaving them, he sternly reminded Herman to treat Alyssa with respect, a sentiment Herman enthusiastically echoed. Herman, brimming with excitement, greeted Alyssa, asking if she remembered him and if she had been well since their last meeting. His exuberance earned him another reprimand from Jennifer for being too forward. Agnes suggested the young nobles remove their coats and wash their hands before playing. Jennifer readily agreed, and they followed Agnes's instructions, carefully drying their hands with handkerchiefs. Alyssa observed their efforts to speak politely, noting that it made them seem slightly hesitant. Undeterred, Herman greeted her again, eager to make a good impression. Jennifer then stepped forward, formally introducing herself. "Greetings, Miss Draven. I am Jennifer, daughter of the Marquis Windseeker, a Windseeker myself." Herman followed suit with his own enthusiastic introduction, lavishing Alyssa with compliments about her cuteness. Jennifer mentioned hearing rumors about Alyssa being visited by elves. While some dismissed the stories due to Alyssa's young age, Jennifer believed it possible, considering the Draven family's unique traits. Alyssa noted Jennifer's mature speech for a 6-year-old, recognizing her as the future archmage of the hero's party. Herman confidently declared that Alyssa was capable of anything, a sentiment Alyssa acknowledged with a quiet understanding of his unwavering faith in her. Jennifer then inquired if Alyssa understood their conversation. When Herman expressed doubt about Alyssa's comprehension, Jennifer expressed surprise, admitting she had expected some sign of understanding. While Herman reassured her that they had anticipated this, Jennifer remained skeptical. As Jennifer began to comment on Alyssa's potential, Alyssa suddenly uttered the word peace, startling them both. Jennifer accused Herman of mimicking baby talk, but Herman denied it, insisting the sound hadn't come from him. Alyssa, with a confident smile, repeated the word Young, greeting Jennifer and Herman. The two children stared, stunned, realizing Alyssa had just said hello. Agnes, witnessing the scene, beamed at Alyssa's cuteness. Alyssa noted how enthusiastic Agnes always seemed, despite seeing each other every day. Herman, bubbling with excitement, asked Alyssa if she could understand them. She affirmed that she could. He then inquired if she remembered him. But Agnes interjected, saying it was unlikely Alyssa would remember someone she'd met as a baby. Jennifer agreed, adding that it was difficult to recall things from such a young age. Alyssa, with unwavering confidence, looked to Agnes. She asked Agnes to confirm which gifts were from Herman and Jennifer. Both children gaped in astonishment when Alyssa correctly identified their presents. Herman, bewildered, wondered how Alyssa knew, asking if she could read minds. Jennifer marveled at the extraordinary qualities of the Draven bloodline. Alyssa found both Herman and Jennifer's reactions adorable. Herman, noticing a slight breeze, wondered if a window was open, but Jennifer explained it was a sprite. She mentioned it was her first time seeing a sprite in person and was amazed by its vibrant colors. Herman admitted he couldn't see it, so Jennifer explained that a sprite's visibility depended on one's affinity with them. When Herman asked what that meant, Jennifer proudly declared herself a descendant of the great Windchasers. Alyssa pondered Jennifer's surname, Windchaser, meaning one who chases the wind, noting her ancestors' deep fascination with wind magic. Alyssa surmised that this fascination might explain Jennifer's keen interest in wind magic. Herman, his excitement bubbling over, asked Alyssa if she could see the sprite. She confirmed that she could. He became even more awestruck, thinking she could even play with it. Alyssa inwardly noted that Herman seemed to regard the sprite as a pet, even though she hadn't officially formed a contract with Sophie yet. Deciding to indulge Herman, she asked Sophie if it wanted to play. Herman, feeling a light breeze, excitedly asked if the sprite was near him. Alyssa nodded, confirming its presence. He then asked if he had just touched it. Jennifer explained that sprites were elemental beings, and while they manifested in physical forms, the concept of touch didn't really apply. However, since his fingers had passed through its form, it could technically be considered touching it. Herman, confused, asked Jennifer if he had actually touched the sprite. Jennifer clarified that his fingers had passed through it. This sent Herman into a panic, thinking he might have killed it. Jennifer reassured him, asking if he saw the breeze split and disappear. When he said no, she told him not to worry. Herman breathed a sigh of relief. Agnes then announced it was snack time for Alyssa, inviting Herman and Jennifer to join. Both readily agreed, Herman chattering excitedly about snacks. As Agnes fed Alyssa, Herman and Jennifer enjoyed their own treats. Afterwards, the three played happily with teddy bears, Alyssa thinking how utterly adorable the two were. As night fell, Agnes settled Alyssa into bed. Alyssa couldn't sleep. The thought of her birthday being just hours away made her restless. Agnes noticed and asked her young mistress why she wasn't asleep. Suddenly, Jennifer and Herman tiptoed into Alyssa's room, gifts in hand. Agnes, surprised, asked why they weren't asleep yet. Jennifer apologized, explaining that it was past midnight and they wanted to be the first to celebrate her birthday. Herman wished Alyssa a happy birthday, and Jennifer offered her own formal well wishes. They explained they wanted to be the first to celebrate and give their gifts. Alyssa was touched by their thoughtfulness, despite their exhaustion from a day of play. In her sweet, halting speech, she thanked them. Jennifer and Herman, satisfied, bid her good night and sweet dreams as they left. Alyssa lay in bed, pondering why she couldn't sleep, realizing she might have been subconsciously waiting for Jennifer and Herman. Agnes noticed Alyssa was still awake. Kissing her forehead, they wished her a happy birthday. Meanwhile, the maids discussed the weather, noting the persistent gloom and hoping it wouldn't snow. Agnes entered Alyssa's room in the morning, greeting her warmly and inquiring about her sleep. Alyssa cheerfully replied with a good morning. Agnes reminded her that it was her birthday and promised it would be a busy but special day. Agnes bathed Alyssa and dressed her in a new outfit, complimenting her adorable appearance. She encouraged Alyssa to enjoy her special day to the fullest. Alyssa nodded in agreement, but a thought flickered through her mind about everyone being so busy. In the past, she would have felt the need to help her friends, but now she felt like the center of attention. She observed Agnes, thinking that so far, Agnes had proven herself to be an exceptional maid. The Duke entered Alyssa's room, greeting her enthusiastically and calling her the most beautiful person in the world. Especially on her birthday, he offered his blessings and promised her a gift later during the presentation ceremony. He expressed a slight regret at not being able to present the gift immediately. Alyssa had a sinking feeling it would be another brooch and worried there wouldn't be any more room left on the canvas to display them. She insisted adorably that the gift could wait, emphasizing later to save the canvas from another adornment. The Duke chuckled, agreeing affectionately that if Alyssa said so, it must be. Alyssa felt a small thrill of victory at successfully protecting her canvas. The Duke told her he had work to attend to, but would see her later. Alyssa waved cheerfully, saying bye. Papa, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. Agnes told Alyssa that everything was prepared and she could rest until 2 p.m. Alyssa wondered how she would pass the time, wishing Herman or Jennifer were there. Just then, her wind sprite, Sophie, appeared. Feeling bored, Alyssa asked Sophie for suggestions. Sophie suggested taking her outside for a look, and Alyssa agreed. Sophie zipped out with incredible speed, leaving Alyssa impressed by its swiftness. Agnes, noticing this, asked Alyssa if she wanted to rest. Alyssa was about to settle down for a nap when Sophie returned, excitedly reporting that there were many people outside. Alyssa thought to herself that she already knew. Sophie described the scene outside as glittering, with carriages and horses, and mentioned a divine blessing. Confused, Alyssa asked for clarification, but didn't understand. Agnes explained that the surroundings were bustling. This was because someone with a divine blessing had arrived. She speculated it might be a priest, but Alyssa realized it wasn't about a priest. Instead, someone truly divinely blessed was present, which reminded her of the protagonist, Anadari, who was blessed by the gods to defeat the demon king. Alyssa pondered the unexpected appearance of someone like Anadari, the fourth prince of the Helios Empire, known for his special abilities and cautious nature, seemed an unusual presence in such a remote place. Especially since in the original story, her father neither celebrated her birthday, nor were there any attendees like Teo. She realized the plot was deviating from the original storyline, unsure if this change was for better or worse. Meanwhile, Sophie described a large fruit, mentioned greeting guests, and birthday wishes from Jennifer and Herman. Sophie added that there seemed to be trouble, hinting that she wouldn't see the baby today. Alyssa thanked Sophie for the update,